Today, we're talking about the scariest parts of building revenue engines, the transitions that are invisible as they happen, but are glaringly obvious in hindsight. To give you an example, we'll focus on a transition every team went through, moving away from founder-led sales. And we'll explore how the same mindset applies with more scaling challenges than you think, going from 10 to 50 million in ARR. And now, enjoy.
The whole model actually does not start with founder-led sales. It starts with founder sales. And there's a distinction there.
This phrase of, oh, we've hired the wrong people and therefore it doesn't work out. This is not only something that someone is using when they're in a failed or struggling to make this transition work out. Those are also phrases that I used hiring a bunch of sales reps, and it didn't work out.
When I talk to founders about what they regret, it is something that they did and did too early or were not ready yet for, rather than something that they didn't do and they should have done sooner. Either I was too early in advancing or trying to push the envelope in something, or I was too late.
Hey, it's pretty much the end of summer, it already feels like. At least here in Copenhagen, right? So it's August 1, day of recording. And it's been raining all last week. It's actually been raining in Germany also for the last month. I feel there was like this spike of 38 degrees and then it was this rain for 2 weeks. Those were coincidentally also the 2 weeks I was in Germany for holidays. So great.
Good timing.
Perfect timing. Where did you spend your summer, Ro?
As usual, I spent a big part of my summer in Romania. I am not sure it could actually be called summer though. Like even there where it's always typically 35, 40 degrees even sometimes, it was raining a lot. It was raining a lot in Germany too. It still is, even technically though we're on August 1st. So I'm a bit disappointed with that. We kind of need a summer getaway here.
And while we were sitting inside and thinking about the rain and, what else we could do, we were starting to think about what could be a cool topic to talk about today. And that really started to fall a little bit around this founder-led sales. I want to call it a myth. It's actually not a myth, but kind of that very difficult area to navigate. Because first of all, it's super interesting. Second of all, a couple of people have asked us about it. But third of all, and this was kind of the key of our conversation, it's like, yes, there's this issue for the founder-led sales transition to a sales-led sales, transition. But the mechanics to go from A to B are actually some of the similar mechanics you need to do in order to scale from 10 to 20 million and kind of figure out how that works. Or kind of if you start a new team and how does that actually work? Or if you think about adding a new AE to the team, there are a couple of those mechanics that are parked under the sales founder-led sales transition that are super applicable for the rest as well. So that's why kind of we're calling it founder-led sales, the 10 million ARR edition here today. So let's jump right into it.
The funny thing about the term founder-led sales is that it's been picking up velocity in usage, and people are using it more and more for all kinds of different situations. It's one of those terms that everyone seems to know, but not everyone agrees on what it actually means, and nobody ever actually bothers to think about. So it's this weird conundrum where people talk about one thing and another person hears another thing from that one single word, and it's actually not very useful in communication. But most of all, even more than that, I'm not even sure that people right now are using it very well to actually enhance their business and grow more. And that's kind of the point of today, right? So what is actually the meaning of founder-led sales? And most of all, how does that help you? And there's much more to it than just the one term that people are thinking. The idea of founder-led sales has kind of spread throughout the GTM world within the 2010s. David Sachs actually is very closely connected to that term, although he was not the only one to use it.
And no one these days knows David Sachs anymore, by the way. It's like, it's so crazy to me how some of the, I want to say greats of the last 15 years are just completely forgotten. Tom Tungish, who's that? I don't know. Never heard of the guy. It's crazy.
I guess we really are boomers then, Tony, you and me. Okay, so look him up. David Sachs. Another guy you might know who's been popularizing the term a lot is Jason Lemkin, right?
Yeah.
Or the Y Combinator guys who are just running around telling people to do founder-led sales all the time. So it's not like he's the only person, but I guess we really are boomers then, right? So that term has been popularized a lot lately, but the usage of that is actually typically just connected to, hey, when you're early stage, what you need to do is do founder sales. And that seems very useful only to early stage companies, but it's actually much more than that, and there's more meaning to it. There's a whole model, and that model is used to describe and can be really helpful in scaling a department, but also scaling your whole company.
So one of the things, let's kind of start out with that, is I think talking to you about it, I have found out that I've been using founder-led sales, the term, in a too loose of a way to be helpful, to diagnose folks that have that issue. Kind of diagnosing myself, understanding where I am on that journey, but also with founders I've been talking about this, right? So let's take the magnifying lens to what founder-led sales in that transition, what those different stages or those different levels are, and to make it a bit more crisp for everyone to follow along.
So this is a bit detailed right now. You don't actually need this necessarily. Maybe it's interesting for you, maybe not. What matters is the idea behind that. So whether you remember those terms or not, whatever. But you've heard them once now. So the whole model actually does not start with founder-led sales. It starts with founder sales. And there's a distinction there, a pretty significant one, which is founder sales is what typically is the first thing, which is you and me, Tony, we start a company, you're the person building the thing, I'm the person who's going to sell the thing, meaning I'm the founder, I'm doing the selling, hence founder sales. Right? That's the first thing. We're two founders, or maybe 3, 4. I'm doing the sales part. It's founder sales. I'm doing it in one person. I'm owning it. I'm owning every process in my head. I might not even have a CRM. Everything is happening through my own sheer commitment and will. And that then moves to founder-led, which is typically what people talk about a lot. Oftentimes, these two are used interconnected, but they're not actually. And founder-led refers to there is something that is being led by the founder, meaning typically either a team and or automations and or processes that are executing some of the GTM function. And this is pretty significant because this means that already new requirements are needed for what is happening in that company. And there's, maybe to foreshadow this, there's a lot of challenges that are happening on the move from founder sales to founder-led sales, and a lot of stumbling blocks. I have heard many, many times, even this year, maybe not exactly the same story, but versions of this story, and I'm sure you're aware of this, or you're familiar with this. Hey, we're an early stage company, and we just moved from founder sales to founder-led sales, whether they know these terms or not. And before that, I did 20, 30K ARR a month. And now I hired 3 people, and we're also doing 20, 30K ARR a month. How can this be? How can it be that with 3 professional salespeople that I hired, I'm as productive as I was before? I'm not even a professional salesperson who's been doing that their whole life. Obviously, these people must suck. This is a very common challenge, and all kinds of versions of this are even problems that we've worked on in the past.
You know what? This phrase, which is obviously half truth and half is not true, actually, of, oh, we've hired the wrong people and therefore it doesn't work out. This is not only something that someone is using when they're in a failed or struggling to make this transition work out. Those are also phrases that I used hiring a bunch of sales reps, and it didn't work out. And kind of it's always the other sales reps don't work out, and that's the problem, actually. Right? And I think one of the big takeaways and realizations here is like, well, maybe it's actually not the people you hire. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's the structure. Maybe it's the onboarding. Maybe it's the process. Maybe it's how you teach them. There might be so many other things, and I think one realization that should click for everyone is whenever you catch yourself or your leaders or someone in the room, maybe the CEO saying like, oh, but those guys were bozos, so therefore it didn't work out. I think whenever you catch yourself, with a version of that, you probably should, after this episode, stop and be like, okay, wait a minute. Actually, I think we are being the bozos here. And I think that's really, I think that's the first insight here from how you describe the problem, right?
To be fair, also a bit of foreshadowing here. Who produced those bozos? Like,
Yeah.
let's assume that
Who
these
hired
people
them?
actually did suck. Yes, who hired them? And maybe this is a little bit of an issue already, which is like, yeah, okay, but there's always going to be a fail rate, and that's true. But maybe part of the reason that you didn't proceed to grow enough yet, or you didn't advance as you wanted to, and you did hire those bozos, is because of your maturity in understanding what kind of salesperson you needed, and then also getting that person attracted to your company, interviewing them, maybe paying the right amount of money, maybe finding the right compensation model. There is a lot that goes into finding those people. So at least, yes, there's some variance to it, but at least assume most of the responsibility of getting those people in there. And maybe it's much more than just saying, yes, it's my bad, I'm sorry, roll. That's not what I'm going at. It's not just taking responsibility. It is then understanding that there's a mechanic behind producing those bozos. So if you don't want to repeat that, yes, acknowledge that maybe you're at fault, but then be like, okay, how could we improve the job description? How can we improve so that we have a better funnel? How can we understand better who we're talking to? And that's already foreshadowing how to solve these things, but that is a mechanic of founder-led sales.
And just kind of finishing the framework here a little bit, we started with the founders doing the selling. Then the founder is hiring an AE to help him or her with the selling. Then we have the next step is founder is too busy managing too many AEs and doing all kinds of other things. Founder hires a sales leader into the position, and in the beginning and whether that's transitory or not, TBD, but that's the sales leader is assisting. It's not really yet leading the team, but it's assisting, right? Then the next step would be the sales leader actually owning the whole thing, right? And I think, all of these different steps are scary in different ways, I feel, and they have different symptoms connected to them. But I think in many cases, the solutions that we're discussing are kind of connecting through those, right? I mean, bro, how do you see, what's the red thread for you going through all of these different transitions?
Yeah. And so this is valuable, in my opinion, for any company at any stage. Maybe we're not talking like a super corporate enterprise. Maybe things break down a little bit there, but up to that world, the nice thing about this model, whether you're wherever you think you're at right now, or even if you're beyond the scaling part, is the point is, it's not just about describing how scalability works. It's also that there's all these other levers that have to move in unison, or at least according to the phase you're at, to enable the next phase of the founder-led sales model. So it's kind of like if you play video games or an RPG or like any kind of games with like evolutions and levels. You're a wizard and you have strength and intelligence and whatever, dexterity. And to move to the next level, you need to have strength at level 5, and you need to have achieved this and that and the other, and you need to have intelligence at level 5, whatever. Even if you're not familiar with that, I think it's a very logical thing, right? You need to kind of like get to certain levels in certain areas to achieve the next level. It is the same in sales. It's just that the game engine does not prohibit you from hiring salespeople, but rather by failing, we will have to come to realize that you were actually not at the level yet that you needed to be to hire 3 or 5 or 10 or 500 salespeople. So the idea basically is there's levels to everything, and you kind of need to get to a certain amount of levels to be able to do the next thing.
And I think the analogy of levels kind of makes sense, but let's make them a little bit more tangible here, right? If I were to say level 0, would that be basically, hey, I'm the founder and I'm just winging it. I'm still figuring things out myself. I don't even know if I have a process, and maybe I do, but I'm not aware of it. And hiring someone into this situation of you winging it and trying to teach someone else how to wing it, that would be a tangible example of, ooh, this is probably going to be difficult. Right?
Yes.
Like, can you expand on this a little bit? Can you give audience a little bit more of an understanding, what, not necessarily what level 1 and 2 and 3 and whatever is, but like how can they think about those different levels? Kind of what's the requirement to achieve level 1 basically, and kind of graduate to level 2?
So the way that I think at least about these levels is, and I don't think it matters too much what exactly the distinctions are and the terms are, but is there are different parts of your engine, organization, whatever you want to call it, right? There's CRM, there's processes, there's people, there's the data part, there's the GTM motion itself, there's where the leads are coming from. So however you want to structure that is actually not that important, I think. You're going to find all kinds of different versions of this. I, for example, like to go with people, processes, strategy, data, and tech. And that is kind of like, okay, you can be in tech, you don't need to be at level 5 yet, you can be at level 1 and you will advance. What does tech mean, for example? CRM, right? So this is a very typical one. Hey, what kind of CRM setup do you need to be able to hire the first salesperson or the first 3? So far I've been doing all the sales myself. Now I'm going to hire 3 salespeople. What kind of CRM do I need? Do I even need one at all? Can I just work with Excel? And how does that work, right? And there's just some best practices to that, right? And depending on your business, the answer might be a little bit of a different one. But what is sure is that to get to the first 3 sales hires, you need some step forward probably. Why? Because all of a sudden you're not working alone anymore, but you're working together with people, and you probably need some sort of way of communicating, even if that is a very shitty Excel that you're using to make sure that you're not talking to the same accounts at the same time. But you will need something to make that happen in a good way. And when you move from 3 to 30, that needs to take a next step. So maybe all of a sudden the Excel thing is not enough anymore. Maybe you need to move to Pipedrive. And then from 30 to 60, maybe you need to move to Salesforce. And why will you do that? Well, because all of a sudden you have much higher automation needs, more people working together on higher complexities with more departments on different products in different markets. So there needs to be currencies in there needs to be time zones and all kinds of things that maybe in Pipedrive are not enabled. And that is the most logical progression of how you need to level from level 0, which is everything is in your own head, to level 1, which is an Excel table, level 2, which is maybe Pipedrive, and level 3, which is Salesforce, throughout your development of your sales development. If that makes sense.
I think that does make sense. I think usually some of the folks listening, when we talk about like CRM, the eyes glaze over. Mine too by now, by the way. But I think let's work maybe on another example that kind of is forming in my head, and maybe you can help me complete it. You started out with, you need the Excel and the CRM in order to organize which accounts you're working on and so forth, right? But to a very similar degree, let's just talk about the sales process and the pitch and your ICP, kind of these kind of things that are super, super crucial, but a little bit more soft and intangible to a degree, right? And it actually starts out, and this is my own experience from it, all of this is in your head. And by the way, it's actually not yet really in your head. It really starts out with, well, these things are kind of forming, right? What is really my ICP? What is the sales track? All of these things are kind of in your head, right? And at some point you get to the level where you're like, oh, I think I've figured this out now. And now imagine you hire someone else into the role, right? The first thing is like, well, how am I going to take what's in my head and put it into her or his head? Like that's the first transition there, right? And maybe that means you need to document things, you need to think through things, and you need to maybe have a conversation with the AE to because maybe you need an external view on what it is you're actually doing, or it helps give this some structure, right? Then maybe it's not 1 AE anymore, maybe it's 2 or 3. Suddenly you need to think about like a meeting cadence. Suddenly you need to think about how do you align those 3 reps that they're actually all saying the same thing, and how do you make sure that they continue to do the same thing, especially as you build new product and have new features, and the pitch kind of needs to get updated, and so on and so forth, right? It's on like I don't have kind of the next step currently in my head, but that's at least for me a way of going from level 0 to level 1 in this example would be everything's in your head to I've written down the key pieces in a Notion document, and my AEs understand what I've wrote there, right? Is that another example of this step function that you're thinking about?
The crucial point there is it is not that there's just one answer for what level 1 means. It will be different in every company. And as you said, maybe level 1 of your processes will be that you just wrote them down in Notion, or maybe even you did a voice memo in Notion or whatever. But you got it out of your own head, and you now made it possible for 2-3 salespeople to step in, listen to that rambling in the voice memo, make sense of that, but now kind of work together as a team of 4 people together with you. And that is considerably different from before that everything was in my own head, right? And that's the point. It could also be that level 1 is already you starting to use like some nice process maps because maybe it does help and maybe it is very complicated. Whatever the answer is, the point is that to go to the next level, you need to advance your next game. And it's not necessarily a step function, as in there's really these very strong steps, and every 12 months you need to upgrade the entire system. It's that these things become a bit more gradual, but then sometimes all of a sudden you look back and realize, oh, we've actually reached a new step without even noticing.
I'm just kind of listening to you. I'm just seeing some of the parallels that I run into managing, $20 and $50 million revenue engines, basically. Right? Issue number 1 is, okay, we've expanded into a new geography. Right? But even in the company, we didn't call it product market fit because we had PMF, so we were at 20 million. But actually in this new geography, we didn't have 20 million, we had 0 million. And we started calling it product geography fit, for some way to say regionalized PMF, basically. And the process there to reach that was actually very similar to how you reach it in general in the first place, in your first geography, if you will, right? You need to figure things out. Nothing is really kind of fully locked in. You might have different competitors. You might have different willingness to pay. You might have different ICPs. Like, there are things that will be slightly different in this new geography, in this new market. And going from, taking your level 5 that you have in your home market and deploying it onto kind of this new world, it probably doesn't actually work out. Kind of some of those procedures and structures and ways of doing things might actually not fully apply yet to your new area that you're kind of expanding into. You need to have a much more entrepreneurial, going from 0 to 1 instead of from 1 to 100 kind of approach there, right? That then over time matures. Over time, yes, you want to actually also that region, that team, you want to grow that into, whatever level 4, 5, 20, where the rest of the organization is. And another example here was for us actually in the $50 million company was expanding into the enterprise, like a very typical thing, right? And it's not like you're gonna not use the CRM, but yes, in a lot of cases you will probably just start out with 1 rep because you can't afford more because it's super expensive already. Maybe that 1 rep will work extremely closely with the VP of sales or even the founder on figuring this thing out. There will be product market fit issues, like what features to develop and, when and how and so forth, how to price and so forth, right? And there again, you're actually going through those different levels. And I think if there's one issue that we've run into, both talking to founders and Series A companies and running big organizations, is like you kind of need to have your level needs to kind of match the situation, right? There are many cases where if you get it wrong, you'll kill the whole thing, right? So there's I'm opening up a new market and I'm applying the same playbook, the same rigidity, with the same scaledness to that new market. It's going to fail, right? Because you applied level 5 to level 0. It's not going to work like that. Or another thing, very, very tangible. Let's just say you are still an earlier stage company. Maybe you are 5 to 10 million. And you're hiring a CRO or VP of sales or something like that. That person needs to at least have an understanding of what level are they dropping into. Because if you're hiring the guy from Salesforce that is in level 1000 and you want to put them into your level 2 super scrappy kind of thing, that person will struggle. And that is already, people know this by now. Like, hey, don't hire for the big logo, hire for the fit here, right? And it's what we're talking about is kind of a translation of that, right? If you want to have that scaled leader, you need to make sure that your organization can actually support this, that you are at that level in order to achieve that. If you have not, then you also need to realize you're going to get that very expensive person in. and that person hopefully is capable to help you level up, but it's going to take 6 months for him or her to do that before they can really unfold the actual job that they were kind of hired for, right? And I'm just kind of trying to make it super tangible for people on how that way of thinking applies 1000% to you, whether or not you're 1 million or 50 million in AR. Would you actually agree with that rule? Kind of, did I mess this up somewhere? It's kind of more in your head actually than in mine.
No, absolutely. And that's the point I was trying to make, and you as well, is this applies to basically any kind of situation, and any kind of ARR or maturity of your company. Now, I'm not going to talk a lot about like the Siemenses and Daimlers of this world, since I don't have that experience that much. But I do know for companies even up to pre-IPO or pre-exit what that looks like. And this applies even up to that point. And I would say that one common thread, which kind of maybe a little bit describes what, or gives it more weight, what you were talking about. This is anecdotal. I didn't run the numbers, but when I talk to founders about what they regret, all kinds of stages, very often, at least 2/3, it is something that they did and did too early or were not ready yet for, rather than something that they didn't do and they should have done sooner. So almost always, I would say 2/3, 70% of the time, these regrets are, we shouldn't have hired those salespeople yet. We shouldn't have expanded to this region yet. We should have taken a couple more months to probe out the tax situation with this and that and the other. We should have taken more time to hire people, whatever it is yet, right? So, or we should actually have spent more time on the processes, because now I see where that led to. And sometimes the regret,
handed over sales faster, right?
Yes.
That sometimes is kind of the opposite, actually, not too late but too early.
Yes. So I would say, though, that also happens, obviously. So I should have done something sooner. But very often, typically what combines those, it's something is about timing. Either I was too early in advancing or trying to push the envelope in something, or I was too late. But both are two sides of the same coin, which is I missed the boat either because I was too late or too early in advancing to the next level, given the circumstances and the opportunity that I had in the business. Now, that's a very broad definition of things, but this is actually what this is about, right? So build the levels, go to level 1 here, go to level 2 there, and then advance to the next level, do the right strategic moves.
But I actually also think, and this is somewhat the difficulty, right? I think a well-known concept is already, let's just say you hire a new salesperson or sales leader, and it's less so important that they come from the same industry. I know it's great if they're in SaaS,
I agree.
or, it's less so important. What is important is, and that's the well-known fact, is how much money are they asking from their customer, right? Kind of what's the ACV level fit, right? If you get a super scale VP of sales that has been doing SMB and, 5K a year maximum tickets, and you want to give that person now 100K tickets, that's not going to work out, right? Because the process just looks different. The hiring profile looks different. Kind of the way he needs to or she needs to behave and work with the customers looks completely different. They just simply don't have this playbook. And there are nuances of that where, maybe you haven't done 100K, but maybe you've done 50K. What is actually key here is that whoever you hire is aware that that's a thing, right? Kind of that. You are to a degree ACV aware or process aware, I want to say, right? And I think what we are uncovering here and making clear for everyone listening is like you probably need the same awareness ability in your leaders for those different levels that you're going through and where you are, right? And crazily enough, this doesn't only apply to your VP of sales on, hey, it's a 100K ticket or it's 5K tickets. I think this also applies to your VP marketing. Kind of, they need to understand, where the organization is, what the next level looks like, on which dimension they need to upgrade next. Where's the next bottleneck? What's gonna F us in the butt if we don't take care of this next, right? You kind of hire those been there, done that folks to tell you that, right? What I've seen many, many times, and this is not for VP marketing, this is also, RevOps, it's the whole spectrum, CS, even product, is that they aren't aware of that. Actually, they're not level aware. And sometimes coming in, okay, I'm the big CRO from big company over here, going to a startup with 3 sales reps. The first thing I'm doing is I'm buying Salesforce and Gong, because those are the tools, and this is really just a tangible example. I don't want to talk about tooling, but it's a tangible example of someone coming in being like, hey, those are the tools, this is the stuff I need, and we need this now, right? Without understanding and being aware, like, I think this is over engineering for where you are right now, right? And how would you actually, and maybe this is a good question for, I think you're really strong on that, but how would you in an interviewing process, how would you ask for that? How would you kind of get this out of people to understand, if they understand this, not specifically the framework we're discussing, but this level awareness?
I would actually expand even and say, and this is one of the actual tips that I would give to solve this, is every person that you're hiring in your GTM function should bring something to leveling up this engine and this whole machine. Every single person, even the AEs, even the SDRs. And even if it's just 2 or 5 or 6%, whatever. And everyone can contribute to that, because if you do leave it to just the CEO or just the CRO or the commercial founder, it's overwhelming. It's going to be too much. Even at a later stage, you do need people to bring you forward. I do think it's not a good idea to only rely on RevOps or only on the CRO to do that, the leveling up game, right? This is a collective effort. And what that means for in reality is that you do want salespeople who are aware of processes a little bit, and they don't spend 98% of their time on processes, but from time to time they will give some good feedback. From time to time they will go to lunch with marketing and product and report back to you what might be a good solution for a problem you're having right now. From time to time they'll keep an eye open on what's happening in customer success and making sure that the whole chain of the maturity of the process is going down the right way. From time to time, they will contribute to the sales decks or the onboarding of salespeople, and they will aspire to that as well. And this is stuff that in the interviews, you should already consciously go for. Of course, when you're hiring for an AE, what matters is that they sell. And if you have a rock star seller that is going to sell everything that you have and going to sell the house out, obviously you hire them, even if they don't have that. But try to go for as many people as possible that have a little bit of that in them. And I find that these orgs just work really well. And that's typically, how do you test that? It is a lot about the ambition that people have and the entrepreneurialism, right? So not just people who want to fulfill a function, but who want to contribute to expanding and getting to the next stage of the business.
It's so funny, actually. Now that we're talking about this, there's so many examples plopping up in my head. So back then, we had a bunch of, a few AEs from like Salesforce, Gartner, and IBM, because that was like a thing in Copenhagen. And we were like, I don't know, sub 5 million or something like this. And based on that, we created the rule, never ever hire from those companies again. And that was basically kind of a rule like that, we can never do that again, because that was obviously silly. And then fast forward, I think 5 years, we were like 40, 50 million, and we were interviewing those sales directors. And I think we ended up going for 2 sales directors from Salesforce. And they ended up like scaling the craziestness, through this organization, be extremely successful, managing their reps in this wonderful way. We never had so good ENPS. The forecast was there. They kind of drove those deals home. Was a fantastic fit, right? What changed was the business has changed, not the people that we basically hired. The profile was, obviously, this one was a director and this other one was an AE, but we as a business matured to the point where suddenly we could actually utilize those Salesforce and Gartner guys. And when they came in, it was still kind of like, I talked with them in the corner, and they were like, nah, like these and these things, they don't really work out yet. So they were aware that it's not fully there yet. But it was kind of working out that they could take us there. If we would have hired those people 5 years earlier, they would have been like, this is a madhouse. There's like nothing here resembles what I need. And then it just wouldn't have worked out. And I really started liking this way of thinking of this, let's call it level awareness, like a whole bunch. Because I think this is a little bit the hidden reason why some of those hires frankly fail, right? It's not only this one dimension of what's the ACV that you've been selling at, and are you a good, capable person, but also do you have stage or level fit with where we are right now, and can you actually take this thing forward, whether you're an SDR AE. That's why people call it sometimes the founding AE, because that's the person that deals with the most craziness versus, and then all the way to VP, basically, right? Pretty cool stuff, Raul.
I'll give one more thing though. It's specifically for companies around plus minus 10 million ARR. Is they are very often premature in assuming the stage that they're at. And this is kind of what you were saying, but in a different way, which is I see so many companies around 10 million ARR already going for the Salesforce director and the CRO and whatever, or the people who work those enterprise companies, which is maybe even 4 or 5 levels too early. And they're already acting as if they were at 500 million ARR, even though it's 10. And I think that it's obvious, it's logical. Hey, don't hire too early for that. I think it's because in a naive way, and I'm not belittling anyone here, but I do think this is actually true. It's a lot of founders kind of see so much happening from 0 to 10 million, and from 0 to 1 million, then from 1 to 5, and then from 5 to 10. And there's like, there were all these steps that were happening in between. And a lot of founders will nod their head. Either they've been through that or they see it in front of them. And they're like, yes, I can see all the evolution that needs to happen. But then they think that from 10 to 100 is actually just one more step. But it's probably much more. And that's kind of where I was going with that today. There's probably another 5 levels ahead of that. And because you think that 100 is the next level, you're already hiring for the 100 million, but actually maybe 12 million or 15 or 20 is the next. And this is actually significant in execution. So maybe break down these jumps, especially the ones in the future, a little bit further. And that would be very helpful to understand where you actually need to go tomorrow and next year rather than in 20 years.
So as we're talking about this, right? So I mean, this is something that is enrolls in my head. Some of that role you've also written down already, but it's not yet fully polished and stuff. If you guys want to hear more about this, please just ping either of us on LinkedIn, and we'll probably keep producing some more content around this whole stage and level fit idea, because I think it's really, first of all, it's new. I haven't seen anyone else talk about it like this, and number 2, I think it's a fairly large reason of why folks start stumbling on any kind of scale, like whether it be like after product market fit for 1 million or up to 100 million. This level awareness and kind of getting that right, I don't think, first of all, it's easy, but it's also even not easy to be aware of that. And maybe let's end it here for today. Everyone, thank you so much for listening, and if you haven't, hit subscribe or maybe send this to your CRO, and see you next week. Cheers.
See ya.
Next week, we're talking about how AI and remote work is making us dumber and less productive. Not because it's a hot take or because I particularly believe in that, but because there's now clear research that supports this notion. And if you don't want to miss this conversation, hit subscribe and see you next week.
The main headline here, report found that remote workers per day work an average of 2.5 hours less.
There's a large difference to me, not necessarily in working hours, but in what's happening in those hours. I would rather take a team of people working 6 hours a day, not checking their phones and not wasting their time, than people 10 hours a day in the office who are half the time asleep on their phone.
Probably very likely work less, maybe learn less on the job. Plus, hey, this AI thing is kind of happening and it's making us a little bit dumber. If you combine those 2 things together, like that's a significant productivity hit we're actually currently experiencing and taking.